My name's Rob Sarkies, and it is an enormous pleasure and honour to welcome to the Big Screen Symposium director Park Chan-wook, who is, I and many others think, one of the foremost creative figures in modern world cinema. His films have consistently combined an incredible sense of style with a darkness and often quite powerful juxtaposition of violence and tenderness, usually with beautiful music. Hopefully, most of you here will have seen at least two of his films, STOKER, which played yesterday and is coming out in New Zealand cinemas this month, and which played last night, and OLDBOY, which was really the film that so far he's been most renowned for, and was really the film that was part of his Vengeance trilogy, all made out of Korea. It's a true honour to have you here. We'll be working with Director Park, doesn't speak very much English, so we'll be working through his translator, Wonjo, here. And the lovely story about Wonjo is that he spent the first, I think, 12 years of his life, 16 years of his life in Wellington. So he's a New Zealander who, for the last, we count him as a New Zealander, who for the last 5 years has been working in an incredibly close collaboration with Director Park, which included literally being on set, working on English translation with the English-speaking actors, including Nicole Kidman. So we've actually got two very interesting people to talk to today. How today's session is going to run is it won't be me speaking, it will be these guys speaking, and what they've decided to do is pull out two sequences, one from STOKER and one from OLDBOY. We're going to screen the sequences starting from about a 10-minute clip from STOKER, and then Director Park is going to take us through, using storyboard references, sort of some of the thinking, I guess, that went into to making this beautiful work. So the intent is a very practical session. We do have a lot to get through, so we're not sure that in this session that we'll be able to manage a Q&A at the end. However, there is an in-conversation that I'll be doing with Director Park tomorrow, which I regard as an in-conversation with the whole audience. So if we run out of time for questions today, which is likely, then we'll do that tomorrow. Yeah. So welcome.
시간대에서 좀 소개를 하시면.
예. 사실 영화를 한 부분만 잘라서 설명한다는 게 좀 의미가 있는 일일까 그렇게 생각도 듭니다만은.
Well, whether there's any point in just lifting out a bit from a work of film and to explain it, at first he was wondering whether there's much point in the exercise, but.
최대한 그 영화 전체 맥락과 결부시켜서 좀 말씀을 드리려고 노력하겠습니다.
He will do his best to try and speak in the context of the whole picture and give meaning to our session today.
잠시 후에 그 씬을 보시겠지만 먼저
You'll be seeing the session in a moment, but
전후 맥락이 뭔지를 먼저 말씀을 드릴게요.
He will talk about the context of what comes before and after the sequence we are about to watch.
내가 인디아의 바쁜 하루라고 부르는 일련의 그 씬으로 이루어진 큰 한 덩어리의 시퀀스 중에 일부입니다.
This is part of what he has named India's busy day?
이 영화의 거의 4분의 1에 육박하는 상영 시간이 영화 속에 단 하루에 할애되어 있습니다.
Comprised of a number of different scenes, which has to do with this one day out of India's life, and it takes up a whopping quarter of the running time of this film.
그만큼 중요한 하루를 인디아는 보내게 됩니다. 거의 보통 사람의 그 평생에 맞먹는 아니면 사춘기 전체에 맞먹는 하루라고 할 수 있죠.
And that speaks to the importance of this day for India. So she spends this a very important day, and we follow her day very closely. But this day, this day that India spends is probably equal to the entire lifetime of an ordinary person, or entire teenage years, or the puberty of any ordinary person.
그 하루는 영화 속에서 학교가 일과가 끝나고 인디아가 이제 하교하기 위해서 학교를 나서려는 순간부터 시작하죠.
And this day begins as India finishes her day of school, and as she exits out of the school building to go home.
그런데 역시 또 삼촌이 그 눈에 띄는 제규어를 세워놓고 바로 정문 앞에서 기다리고 있는 거예요. 여자애들은 계속 지나가면서 수군대고.
But on this day also, as he had done previously, Uncle Charlie is waiting for her in the driveway of the school with the Jaguar, which draws so much attention from her peers. And we see a lot of girls, gathered in groups, walking at Uncle Charlie and talking about who this man is.
인디아는 전날 지하실의 냉동고에서 맥게이 부인의 시체를 발견했습니다. 그러니까 삼촌에 대한 공포를 갖고 있죠.
It just so happens that the previous day, India had discovered the body of Mrs. McGarrick in the freezer, so she is somewhat afraid of her uncle.
이것은 또 떼어놓을 수 없는 또 하나의 그 측면을 갖고 있는데, 그것은 이 영화가 굉장히 그 별난 사람을 다루고 있는 것 같지만 사실 저는 제 생각에는 굉장히 평범한 소녀의 이야기의 어떤 과장된 비유 같은 것이라고 생각할 때, 친구들 앞에 두드러지게 눈에 띄는 것을 싫어하는 그런 평범한 소녀의 소심한 마음을 표현하기도 합니다.
There's something that is closely related to. There's an aspect that he wants to talk about, which is very closely related to this entire day or this particular scene. And the notion is that, for him, India is not such an extraordinary or completely different from any other girls her age. What you see in Stoker is basically a very exaggerated metaphor for a girl going through the stage of puberty or coming of age. So when we consider that notion, that India is a teenage girl going through puberty, of course she would not want to have her uncle create a scene and attract a lot of attention from her peers. She would not want to be seen with her getting picked up by her uncle, who's the center of so much attention at this particular point.
차가 아름다울수록 또 삼촌이 미남일수록
The more
창피한 거죠.
outstandingly beautiful the car or outstandingly handsome her uncle, the more embarrassed India would get.
그래서 뒤로 돌아서 가기로 결심을 하고 학교 건물의 뒷곁으로 가다가 피츠라는 불량배 일당한테 딱 걸리게 되는 거죠.
So she decides to avoid her uncle by taking the going out the back door and taking the alleyway route. But on her way, she is encountered by Pitts and his crew.
그리고 싸움이 벌어지고 모욕을 당했을 때 인디아가 강력하게 대처합니다. 그 주먹을 날리는 피츠를 향해서 뾰족한 연필을 들이대서 손에 상처를 입히죠.
So conflict ensues, and Pitts has insulted India, and India, incensed, takes a very proactive stance against Pitts's actions to defend herself. Pitts throws a punch at her, and India takes out her pencil, very sharp one, and uses that to block the punch. And in the process, punctures his fist with this sharp pencil.
그것은 두 가지 의미를 갖는데요. 하나는 스토커라는 제목이 유명한 어떤 소설의 작가의 이름인 걸 여러분이 아시겠죠?
It has two meanings. That particular action beat. As well aware that you all are, Stoker happens to be a name of a very well-known writer.
이 뾰족한 연필 끝에 맺힌 피는 분명히 그 뱀파이어의 송곳니, 피를 빨아먹은 후에 송곳니를 즉시 떠올리게 하죠.
And the blood, the drop of blood that you see at the end of the pencil after that stabbing, it's invariably reminiscent of a vampire's fang just after the vampire has taken his or her fill of the blood.
저는 이 영화에서 스토커, 인디아 스토커를 평범한 사춘기 소녀로 묘사하는 하나의 라인이 있고 또 동시에 정말 우리와는 다른 종, 세상에 없는 가장 특이한 종류, 말하자면 흡혈귀 같은 그런 것일 수도 있지 않는가 하는 두 가지의 상반된 선을 두 가지를 다 동시에 가고자 했습니다.
He wanted to have two approaches to the character of India. One we already talked about, as an ordinary girl going through puberty. But on the other hand, running parallel to this notion is the idea that India is of completely different species from the rest of us, and there's particular characteristics about her that makes her feel almost like a vampire.
또 하나의 의미는 인디아의 감추어진 어떤 폭력성, 잔인성에 관한 것입니다.
So that's one meaning that it has, and the second meaning is to do with India's violent tendencies and her cruelty.
이미 앞선 장면에서 미술실 장면에서 관객은 피츠가 여자에게 주먹을 휘두를 때 정말 때리는 것이 아니라 바로 앞에서 딱 멈추는 그런 단지 겁을 주기 위한 행동, 그런 제스처에 불과하다는 것을 이미 본 적이 있습니다.
We've seen before during the art class scene that Pitts is known to throw his fist at girls, but he doesn't go through all the way as to actually punch the girl, but he stops, he pulls his punch just before it connects. And we've seen that. So for Pitts, this is just a play, or it's just a mere gesture, but he doesn't intend to actually make that contact. We've seen this. We've established this in the art class.
Should we have a look at the clip? I think it's queued up.
예, 이 얘기만 마저
He
하고.
will just finish the.
Okay, that's fine.
그래서 연필을 들이대는 그것도 미리 꺼내서 준비해서 들고 있다가 딱 갖다 대는 것은 좀 과잉 방어에 가까운 행동이죠.
So when she has held up that pencil to block his fist, which we know is not going to connect, you can consider that as overtly protective action,
그리고 나서 이제 집에 와서
almost on the offensive.
집에 와서 피아노 앞에 앉아서 두 가지 행동을 하는데 하나는 연필에 묻은 피를 연필깎이로 깎아내는 것이고 또 하나는 전날 밤에 그 맥게리뿐의 시체를 발견했을 때를 회상하는 겁니다.
And when she comes back home after that confrontation, she does two things. She sharpens her pencil, peeling the part of the pencil that has Pitt's blood on it. And right after, she reminisces about the moment she saw Mrs. McGarrick's face inside the freezer.
그것은 사실상 한 가지나 다름없는데 한 가지로 설명되는데 뭐냐면은 내 안의 폭력성을 직시하는 것이죠. 그러니까 왜 나는 시체를 봤는데 놀라서 도망가지 않았을까? 왜 경찰에 신고하지 않았을까? 왜 나는 물러섰다가도 다시 가까이 가서 그걸 찬찬히 들여다봤을까? 나는 도대체 뭘까? 라는 것입니다.
And it can be explained this one notion that she is staring at the violence that she harbors inside her directly. So she's staring right into the eyes of the violence that she harbors inside. That's why she asks herself the question, why didn't I run away after having seen Mrs. McGarrick's face inside the freezer? Why didn't I take up the phone and report it to the police? Why did I rather, having jumped back in surprise, find myself drawn to this dead woman's face inside the freezer?
그런 다음에 이제 이런 모든 문제를 야기한 엉클 찰리와 나란히 피아노를 치게 되는 것이죠.
And after that, she starts to play the piano and is joined by Uncle Charlie, who was the instigator of all of these questions.
다시 말해서 폭력적인 자신 안의 폭력성의 발견은 바로 이어진 피아노 연주에서의 관능성으로 바로 연결되는 겁니다.
In other words, this discovery of violence within herself is followed by the sensuality of this piano duet.
그것은 분리할 수 있는 게 아니죠.
And these cannot be separated.
그 점은 바로 나중에 샤워 시퀀스에서 그 아이디어는 절정을 맞게 됩니다. 폭력성과 관능성.
Because it reaches its apex, this idea of closely linked violence and sensuality. It reaches its peak during the shower scene, which is to come later on.
지금 보실 장면은 바로 그 피아노 듀엣에 이어지는.
So what you're about to see, this sequence comes right at the heel of the piano duet, and before it will end before the shower sequence. So this sequence is right in the middle.
I'm sure if you haven't seen the film, it'll
노래를 못
make you want to see
봤다면은 멋있게 만들어지는
the rest of it.
장면이 아닌가.
I'm very interested.
굉장히
Now that you've explained some of the ideas behind that sequence, in how you started to visualize that when you were taking the sequence from the scripted words to something that you were going to film. What was in your head?
그래서 어떤 공연들이 있었는지.
시각화한 과정이.
네. 일단 뭐 지금
제가 이제 늘 스토리보드를 다 처음부터 끝까지 만듭니다.
He always works on storyboards before going into production, and we do have example to show you, which if I can work out how to.
Do you, before you start, we'll see some of your storyboards. Before you start with the storyboards,
스토리보드를 시작하시기 전에
do you have a process of, what would your process of preparation be to take you to the storyboard stage?
가는 과정에서는 어떤 점 보시는지.
좀 특이하죠. 미국하고는 달라요. 그러니까 저는 DP를 상당히 일찌감치 부릅니다. 그리고 미술 감독도 일찍 불러요.
It's you might consider it quite unique and certainly quite different from how it's done in America, for instance. He involves his DP and his production designer very early on.
그래서 각본 집필 단계 한 그 후반부부터는 그들이 합류해 있습니다. 그래서 각본을 같이 쓰진 않아도 계속 끊임없이 의견을 묻고 또 그들의 의견을 받아서 각본에 반영하죠.
So by the time that he's nearing the completion of his script, his production designer and his DP would already be brought on board. And although he wouldn't exactly write the script with his DP or production designer, he certainly engages in a dialogue with them to exchange a lot of opinions and thoughts and ideas, ask questions to each other.
And that influences the script?
그것이 이제 시나리오의 반영이.
그렇죠.
Yes.
그래서 시각적인 스타일이 머릿속에 윤곽을 잡아가는 과정이 그것과 각본이 완성되는 과정이 이제 병행하는 겁니다.
So that towards the end of that process, the way he would shape up the visual style for that particular film and the completion of the script is happening in tandem.
그래서 뭐 아주 구체적인 얘기를 하기보다는 좀 일반적인 거죠. 그냥 뭐 예를 들어서 이 영화는 뭐 채도가 좀 높은 화면일까 아니면 낮은 화면일까 어떤가 또는 세트를 많이 짓는 영화일까 아니면 로케이션을 많이 활용하는 영화일까 그런 얘기들을 하는 겁니다.
But at this stage, with his DP and production designer, rather than talk about anything too specific, it'd be more generic aspects of the film's visual style, such as, do you think the color temperature of this film should be high, hot, or cool? Or do you think we should make use of set more than going on location? That sort of thing.
예를 들면 여주인공은 이 장면에서 바지를 입을까 치마를 입을까 이런 거 중요한 거죠.
But nevertheless, there are very important questions to be discussed, such as whether the female character, the female protagonist, should wear pants here or skirt here.
예를 들어서 바지를 입는다면 스토커의 앞뒤 장면에서처럼 바람에 이렇게 치마가 날리는 그런 화면을 만들 수 없잖아요. 그러니까 그런 것도 굉장히 영화의 굉장히 중요한 요소라는 겁니다.
It is a very important aspect of film. The question of whether the female protagonist should wear a pair of pants or a skirt. Because, for instance, with Stoker, in the bookend structure with the opening and the closing, we see India and her skirt billowing in the wind, right? And the way it speaks to how the character is liberated, and we're following a journey of her finding freedom, which speaks to the idea of India coming of age. But this is not possible if she was wearing pants. So these kind of choices are important and need to be talked about earlier on.
네, 그래서 명심해야 될 것은 그 시각적 스타일이라는 것은 어디까지나 드라마, 어디까지나 감정, 캐릭터 이런 것들과 딱 붙어서 같이 가는 것이어야 하지 그것과 동떨어져서 어떤 멋을 부리고 어떤 그냥 독자적인 어떤 아름다움을 추구하기 위한 것이어서는 안 된다는 겁니다.
So one thing you need to really keep in mind is that when we're looking at visual style to be applied to a particular film, it needs to be centered around the drama and the emotions and the characters. It just cannot be visual style for visual style's sake. It cannot function on its own out of the context of the drama and the characters.
I think it's one of the things that's so extraordinary about your work is that it absolutely is in function, the visual style is in function of the character and story, and yet the visual style is spectacular and consistently throughout your work, which is one of the things that I'll talk to you about tomorrow because it's a difficult balance. Often visual style takes over. onto storyboards. Oh, sorry. So let's go to the storyboards. Is your process to sit down with an artist and re-experience the film by drawing it?
감독님의 이제 긍정 작업 감정이 아티스트를 앉혀놓고 이제 하나하나 같이 그려 나가시는 건지.
네, 그렇죠. 대개는 나와 DP가 같이 하죠. 그리고 그림 그리는 아티스트는 따로 있죠.
So usually he will sit down with his DP first and work out how each shot should be visualized, and then bring on board an artist to carry out the drawing of those discussions. So we'll probably not have enough time to read through each panel, but this is to give you a view, an idea of where the shots were at the storyboarding stage, which comes right at the heel of a script development process for Director Park. So this is the piano sequence you just saw, where Uncle Charlie suddenly disappeared. You can see it's slightly different from how it's finally realized. That's the dirt. We called it magic dirt during the production that was on the piano stool. And we see India on her bed. And then the couple of shots, the spider and the shot of India's mother, we saw that already right at the beginning of the film, just before her father's funeral. And it was Director Park might speak to that a little more, but during the storyboarding process, those shots weren't part of that particular scene, but were added during the post-production. And then we see her climbing down the stairs to find her mother and her uncle as they dance to Summer Wine, which was a song that Director Park really wanted to use for this sequence right from the very beginning. And this is the transition with the train at the top. That's the diner scene, exterior. And then we see them to crossing the railway track and in the playground, which is quite faithfully realized in the final film, right up to the point where Whip's tongue is bitten, and holy shit, there you go.
이 장면은 지금 보셨지만 좀 바뀐 데가 많죠.
As you've just witnessed, the sequence that you saw and how it was storyboarded, there are some differences between them too.
제가 한국에서 만든 영화에 비하면은 스토리보드대로 많이 못 찍은 가장 많이 달라진 영화입니다. 왜냐하면 촬영 횟수가 너무 적었기 때문에 스토리보드대로 다 찍다가는 스케줄 맞출 수가 없었어요.
Compared with films that he makes in Korea, this STOKER was an instance where from the storyboard and what you see on screen, there's quite a stark difference. It's probably the film where the difference is the biggest.
그리고 편집을
And that was because, he had compared with how he would conduct a shoot in Korea, he had a smaller number of shoot days on STOKER.
그리고 편집실에서 좋은 아이디어가 가장 많이 나온 영화이기도 합니다.
But it's also a film where many great ideas came out during the editing process. Probably the film with the most occurrence of that instance.
대표적인 게 거미의 활용인데
And the representative aspect was, sorry,
얘가
the best example that speaks to that is probably the spider shot, the spider going into a skirt.
이 거미를 놓고는 참 많은 논쟁이 있었어요. 애초에 나한테 온 각본은 웬투어스가 쓴 각본은 거미부터 시작하는 거였어요.
And there were a lot of arguments over the spider during the preparation for this film. The script that Wentworth Miller wrote, that came to him originally, it starts with a shot of the spider.
피아노에서 내려와서 페달을 밟으면서 연주하는 인디아의 발을 향해서 기어가다가 인디아가 그걸 발견하고 쾅 밟아 죽인다가 이 영화 나한테 주어진 첫 오프닝이었어요.
So the opening, as it was written in that draft that Director Park read, was spider climbs down the piano, crawls its way across the floor and towards the pedal, which is being worked by India's foot. And before it reaches her foot, India stomps on it and kills it before it has a chance to climb up leg, I mean.
그래서 나는 그게 싫었어요.
But he didn't like it.
왜냐하면 소녀가 그렇게 밟아 죽인다는 것은 굉장히 충격적인 소녀의 소개인 것 같지만 사실은 그렇지 않다는 것이 내 생각입니다.
You might think that to introduce the character of India by her stomping on a spider would be a pretty strong introduction to the character, pretty shocking introduction to the character. But he didn't necessarily think so.
왜냐하면 거미가 그렇게 발을 향해서 기어가고 있다. 이것이 오프닝인데 그리고 이 영화는 뭔가 무시무시한 스릴러라고 홍보될 테고 그런 선입견을 갖고 관객들은 보러 올 테고 그리고 감독이 누군지도 알고 올 텐데 인디아 그 거미가 밟혀 죽는다는 것은 오히려 너무나 예측 가능한 거라는 것이 내 생각이었습니다.
It's because you see in the opening shot a spider climbing down the piano, crawling towards her foot, which is working the pedal. Now, the film is bound to be advertised as a scary thriller. The audience will already have a preconceived idea about that, and they would know who the director is, too. So, for the audience, just by looking at the spider as it crawls its way towards this foot that is walking up and down on the pedal, they would already expect what the outcome of the spider would be, what his destiny in the next few seconds will be.
그래서 나는 이 장면을 다 빼자고 했어요. 근데 스튜디오에서는
So he wanted to get rid of the whole thing.
이 오프닝을 너무 좋아하더라고요. 그래서
But the studio loved this opening so much.
계속 논쟁이 있었어요. 근데
There was a lot of discussion and argument over the scene.
그래서 내가 낸 아이디어는 뭐였냐면은 반대로 가자.
So he came up with the idea, let's go the opposite way.
밟아 죽이긴 그냥 올라오도록 내버려둔다.
Rather than the predictable demise of the spider by way of a stomping foot, let's have it climb up her leg.
관객은 아무 정보가 없어요. 이 소녀가 어떤 성격인지 뭔지 몰라요. 근데 아주 예쁘장한 소녀가 아름다운 음악을 연주하고 있을 때 거미가 기어 올라오는 걸 알면서도 가만히 둔다. 오히려 이것이야말로 충격적인 소개가 아닐까요?
The audience has no information about this pretty girl sitting at the piano, playing beautiful music. And if we see a spider crawling up her leg, and this girl is not scared by it, not surprised by it, she merely looks down to observe it, isn't that a shocking version? Isn't that the more shocking version?
더군다나 그 거미가 스커트 안으로 들어가 버린다. 그런데도 가만히 앉아 있다면.
Furthermore, the spider proceeds to go inside her skirt, and even then the girl isn't affected by that, it seems.
그랬더니 그건 좋아하더라고요.
And the studio liked this version.
그래서 그렇게 찍었는데.
So that's how it was shot.
근데 편집실에서 난 또 새로운 문제를 제기하게 됐어요.
And after the production wraps, during the post-production in the editing room, he came up with another suggestion.
너무 충격적이다, 지나치다라는 거였습니다.
This is still too much. This is too shocking an introduction for the character.
이것은 너무나 우리의 주인공 소녀가 너무나 이상한 아이처럼 보였어요.
What statement are we making about India right off the bat to show her, she's not affected by a spider crawling up her leg and inside her skirt, no less.
나는 평범한 아이가 어떻게 변해가는지 그 곡선을 그리고 싶었는데 이건 너무 높은 데서 시작한 더 올라갈 데가 없는 소녀가 돼버렸죠.
The character arc he wanted for India was to have her start as a relatable, ordinary girl going through puberty, but then her coming of age and turning into this complete being, which is quite other than what we would expect.
그래서 지금처럼 무릎에 올라오는 데까지는 오프닝에 두고 스커트로 들어가 버리는 건 지금 이 자리로 따로 떼어서 뒤로 밀어놓은 겁니다.
And that's why he needed to dial down that introduction. Otherwise, India would already have started at such a high point, and there's nowhere really for her to go. So he dialed it down by showing the spider crawl up to about her knee, but we leave the spider at that point, but come back to it during this scene.
그것은 어떤 효과를
And to show the remainder of it, which is spider crawling inside her skirt.
그것은 아주 좋은 효과를 하나 만들어줬는데 뭐냐면은 피아노 연주를 옆에서 엉클 찰리가 했는데 과연 이것은 실제일까? 꿈일까? 하는 질문이 있죠. 왜냐하면 바로 이어서 잠을 자는 인디아를 보여주니까. 그런데 이것이 들어감으로써 그 양상이 조금 바뀌게 됐습니다.
Now and this decision had a very good effect, and which is during the piano duet, Uncle Charlie was playing alongside her, sitting next to her, but we get to wonder, did it actually happen, or was she dreaming it? Especially when we show Uncle Charlie suddenly gone from the piano room, and the scene is followed by her sleeping on her bed. Has she dreamt it? Did it actually happen?
그래서 이 피아노까지는 실제인지, 피아노도 환상인지, 거미가 스커트로 들어간 것은 물론 당연히 거미는 엉클 찰리를 상징하는 존재인데 거미가 스커트로 들어간 것은 실제 있었던 일의 회상인지 아니면 꿈인지 이 모든 것이 혼란스럽게 되는 거죠.
So it creates a lot of confusion about whether what she's experienced is real or is it a dream. Up until the piano scene, did it all happen or did she dream it up? When we see the spider crawling inside her skirt, obviously she's thinking back to the opening, the moment before Uncle Charlie's arrival, spider was crawling up her leg while she was playing the piano. Of course, the spider represents Uncle Charlie, but showing it going inside her skirt, it begs the question, did it now actually take place, or is it all a figment of her imagination?
Can I ask? I think that's fascinating, particularly in regard to the beginning of the film. So often we want to tell people what's going to happen before we let it happen, and changing that beginning, you can see it making a huge difference. It's great to hear your process there. I've got one question about that sequence. A moment that I thought was particularly elegant was the India on the what are those called? The round thing, the merry-go-round.
To call it the merry-go-round.
The merry-go-round, and during that very key speech where we get to see literally different angles of her as she's going round, and you choose not to show it, so it's almost dreamlike. I just thought it was extraordinary. I'm very interested. I'm sure you guys would agree. It's lovely filmmaking. I'm very interested in, I guess, just the thought processes that brought you to that idea.
그 아이디어를 생각하시게 만든 그 생각 공정이 좀 궁금합니다. 어떻게 해서 그 시퀀스를 그렇게 메리고라운드에서.
그건 각본에 있었나? 윈터스에 각본에 있었던가?
메리고라운드는 있었어요.
네,
거기서 그거를 안 보여주고
그렇죠. 그러니까 지금
약간 요정같이 만드는 건
스토리보드에 보셨다시피 영화하고 조금 달라요. 그러니까 거기서 대사를 한다는 것이 윈터스 각본에 있었습니다. 근데 내가 이제 변화를 준 것은 그것이 처음에는 안 보이게 한다는 것이었습니다.
Well, as you could see in the storyboard, I'll just flick it back to the merry-go-round, which is here. So as you can already see there, and it was found in way Wentworth wrote it. She does deliver that speech on the merry-go-round to our recollection, but he changed it a little bit, even from the storyboard, and it was a decision not to show the merry-go-round, but just to show her eerily spinning around.
그러니까 그 놀이기구를 프레임 아래에 둠으로써 인디아가 아까 말씀드린 좀 인디아가 초인간적인 존재 같은 느낌? 뭔가 허공에 이렇게 떠서 이렇게 마음대로 이렇게 움직일 수 있는 사람인 것 같은 그런 환영을 좀 만들고 싶었어요. 그래서 일부러 소리도 그 삑삑거리는 소리도 나중에서야 거기서 내릴 때만 들리게 했고, 그리고 그 여러 번의 테이크를 바로 이것 때문에 거듭해야 했는데 프레임에 절대 들어오지 않도록 그렇게 해서 찍었죠.
And the intention to frame it so that the merry-go-round is just out of the frame makes her seem as if when she's just going around, and she makes her seem like a superhuman being who has the power at will to just levitate off the ground and just float about. And that's why he intentionally left out the sound of the merry-go-round, the squeaky sound, and only introduced it when the shot reveals that she is actually on a spinning merry-go-round, and that's the only time. That's only when you start to hear the squeaky sound as well. And because this was an important thing to achieve, as you can see, it's quite a long, one take, but we had many takes to make sure that that notion was conveyed.
And this idea came somewhere between storyboards and the shoot, or did it come on the shoot day?
촬영할 때 사이에 어디에 현장에서?
아니 현장은 아니고.
Not on the day of the shoot, but.
그러니까 스토리보드는 첫 촬영 이전에 다 완성돼 있었으니까요. 그 촬영 시작하고 나서 이제 어느 기간 동안이었죠.
Because storyboard was completed long before we began on the first day of the shoot. So between that time somewhere.
네, 이 놀이터 장면은 이제 이 메리고라운드가 있고 그 다음은 이제 미끄럼틀이 있죠. 그것이 이제 새로 만들어진 놀이기구인데요. 이 영화에는 저런 계단을 이용한 것들이 굉장히 많이 나옵니다. 원래 내게 주어진 각본에서는 처음 인디아와 엉클 찰리가 대화하는 왜 너 낮은 데 있으면 뭐 어쩌고 하는 문제 알아? 뭐 하는 그런 거 있잖아요. 그것만 계단 장면이었는데 많은 것을 계단으로 바꿔버렸어요. 그래서 영화 전체의 계단이 가장 중요한 시각적인 모티프가 되도록 한 거죠. 특히 미끄러운 틀이라는 것은 나중에 이제 엉클 찰리가 어렸을 때 자기 동생을 묻어버릴 때도 역시 미끄럼 틀에서 벌어지게 했습니다. 그렇게 해서 두 개가 쌍을 이루도록 배치했죠.
You know, between the original script, let's call it, by Wentworth Miller and what you see on the script, with regards to this particular scene, he's introduced some new elements, and slide is another one of them. In this, because he wanted to show India walking up the steps to get to the top of the slide,
With the moon behind.
with the moon behind. And in this film, when you see it, you'll notice there are a lot of sequences which feature stairs. And it was important to Director Park. It became an important visual motif in the end. But when he had the script that he started off with, the Wentworth script, it only featured one important moment involving the stairs, which was between India and Uncle Charlie when they have that conversation right at the beginning, right at the beginning of the film. But he's decided, there was probably one more moment after that, but the Director Park has decided to turn that into an important visual motif, and for instance, in this sequence, introduced steps with a slide, and the slide, it also becomes an important visual motif in another sense, because when Uncle Charlie, when he was little, so the little Charlie, when he buries his competition for his brother's affection and a little baby, Jonathan, he uses the slide to lure the baby into the hole that he dug out. And if you haven't seen the film, I'm sorry.
Spoiler alert.
So it's an important parallel ideas running, and that's why he wanted to introduce the idea of the slide in this Wana as well.
Well, it's fantastic. It's works beautifully there. 2 minutes.
Maybe a question from the audience for that sequence we just...
Yeah,
Okay,
are there any
then,
questions? Just one question.
Just one question.
About the sequence that we've just seen.
So the question is, between the storyboard and what ended up on the screen, there's the difference, and was it dictated by the exigencies of the production, such as the location limitations, or is that the question? Right. Good. Okay, so the question is, were the shots inspired by the location, or was it the other way around? 그 샷이 로케이션에서 영감을 받아서 그렇게 구성이 됐는지, 아니면은 그 모든 샷들이 샷의 이제 계획이 이제 로케이션 선정에 영향을 줬는지가 궁금하다고.
그거는 양쪽 다예요.
Well, it's both actually.
그러니까 각본을 쓰는 과정, 또 스토리보드를 만드는 과정에 계속 이건 어떤 장소여야 되겠다라는 이미지를 구체화시켜 나가죠. 그러나 그것대로 모든 것이 이루어지면 얼마나 좋겠습니까만은 현실은 그렇지 않잖아요.
Well, during the process of developing and writing the script and all the process with the storyboard, the location requirements for a particular location starts to form. There's a list of requirements for a location to satisfy the shot, and it gets down to very specific details. But the reality is that you can't have everything.
그런데 그
You can't find something that satisfies everything of the list.
내가 꿈에 그리던 장소를 못 찾는다고 해서, 또는 그런 그대로 세트를 지을 돈이 없다고 해서 꼭 나쁜 것만은 아니에요. 왜냐하면 뭔가 다른 걸 찾다 보면 더 좋은 게 나올 수도 있으니까.
But even if he can't find the location of his dream, it's not a bad thing if he doesn't have the money to build a set to meet with all the specific list of the things he wants for the shot or the sequence. It doesn't matter sometimes because actual location sometimes it inspires you and inspires the shot.
그래서 스토리보드 만드는 과정은요, 로케이션을 찾는 작업과 그다음에 프로덕션 디자이너가 셋 디자인을 하는 작업, 이 두 가지와 항상 같이 가야 합니다. 스토리보드 작업은.
So that's why the storyboard process really has to go hand in hand with the location scout and production and set designing, because it has to inform each other. The storyboard process, location scouting, production design.
그래서 긴밀하게 서로 계속 정보를 주고받으면서 서로에게 영향을 주고받는 것이 바로 스토리보드 작업입니다.
And storyboarding process is a process of interaction, basically, between all these different departments, location scout and the production designer. And information has to flow real time and very quickly and needs to be shared by all the different departments. And in turn has to inform the storyboard as much as the storyboard and the ideas from there informs all the other departments.
Look at the OLDBOY, the clip from OLDBOY.
그래서 이렇게 뉴질랜드에 영감을 준 장면이었고, 사실 그렇지만 애초에 여기 올 때는 뉴질랜드가 중요해서 온 건 아니었어요. 영화 속에서 뉴질랜드인지 아니면 한국의 어느 산낙지대인지는 별로 중요한 문제가 아니었습니다.
So, although he was inspired by that location to change the ending of his film OLDBOY, when he first made the decision to come to New Zealand, it wasn't so important whether it was New Zealand or some other place that he was coming to. All he needed was a view on the snowy mountain, and it could play for Korea or any other location, really.
시간이 좀 흘렀다는 느낌도 주고 싶었고요.
He wanted to give the audience the sense that time has passed.
그리고 그러니까 계절이 바뀌었다는 뜻이죠.
In other words, the season has changed.
그리고 뭔가 어딘지 불분명하게 함으로써 좀 마지막을 신화적인 분위기로 마무리하고 싶었습니다.
And by making the ending, the scenery, to the audience, for the audience not to be able to tell exactly, put a finger on where this is this Korea? It doesn't look like it. Where are our two characters? And by doing that, he wanted to imbue the film with a sense of, give it a mythical quality to it.
영화, 그러니까 이제 그 최면의 과정을 시각화하는 것인데.
And now, to talk about visualization of the process of hypnosis.
유리에 비친 남자와 또 실제 모습을 이렇게 둘이 다른 사람인 것처럼 다른 표정을 짓고 있죠.
Now, the man who is reflected in the window and the actual man, they have different expressions on their faces.
그래서 최면술사의 명령에, 그러니까 지시에 의해서 돌아서서 걸어가 끝에 한 스텝에 한 살씩 나이를 먹고 죽는, 상징적으로 죽는 사람은 유리창에 비치지 않은 사람이죠.
So the man who gets the instructions from the hypnotist turns, takes steps, and with each step ages 1 year and eventually and symbolically dies, is not the man who's reflected in the window.
그렇지만 그래서 거기서 다시 깨어난 그 눈밭에 기절해 있다가 다시 깨어난 남자는 바로 유리창에 비쳐 있던 사람입니다. 왜냐하면 비밀을 모르는 사람이 바로 그 사람입니다.
In the next scene, the man who wakes up in that snowfield is the man who doesn't know the secret, the man who was reflected in the window.
이 영화 전체에 걸쳐서 바로 그런 이중성이 굉장히 중요합니다. 오대수는 이 감금되기 이전이 진짜 오대수일까? 아니면 그리고 나서 풀려났은 사람이 진짜 오대수일까? 그것은 어느 것이 더 바람직하느냐라고 그런 질문일 수도 있고 또는 무엇이 본질이냐는 질문일 수도 있죠.
And this idea of duality is important for the whole film. 오대수, before the incarceration, is he the real 오대수? Or the 오대수 who spent the 15 years inside that private cell and was released, is he the real 오대수? The question is also related to which version do we want him to be? Or what is the true nature of this man?
또는 오대수와 이유진은 하나의 인격의 양면일까?
Or we could ask the question about 오대수 and his nemesis 이유진 and ask, are they just two sides of just one character, one personality, split into two different sides?
미도는 딸일까? 연인일까?
Is Mido a daughter or a lover?
이런 모든 이중성이 가장 간명하게 시각화된 것은 두 개의 릴 테이프의 형상이죠.
All these ideas about duality is presented as a visual metaphor in the most obvious fashion when you see those two reels of tape playing on that tape deck.
물론 이제 기능적으로 보자면 기억을 지우는 이 최면의 과정을 하나의 테이프에서 하나의 테이프로 하나의 릴에서 다른 릴로 테이프가 다 옮겨짐으로써 하나는 기억을 완전히 잃어버리는데 성공하는 그것을 뜻하고 있기도 합니다.
But again, but on the other hand, it serves a function as well. That particular shot of the two reels on the tape deck, it speaks to the process of erasing 오대수's memory by showing the tape from one reel moving on to the other reel and show how successfully the memory has been removed from one 오대수 by showing the tape which was full of tape as now the tape has been transferred to the other.
제가 이 영화에 신화적인 느낌을 부여하고 싶었다고 말씀드렸는데 그것은 이야기의 구조에서도 드러나는데요.
When he said that he wanted to imbue the film with some mythical qualities,
이것은 이렇게 몇 번이고 이렇게 이야기되는 이야기입니다. 다시 말해서 영화에서 옥상에서 만난 남자에게 내 얘기를 들려주겠다라고 해서 들려주는 구조가 하나 있고요.
he has built into the film many instances where it speaks to this idea. OLDBOY, in a way, is a story told within a story a number of times. We begin the film with 오대수, with that man who was just about to jump off the ledge. He stops him and he says to him, I will tell you my story.
그런가 하면 미도는 오대수의 감금방에서 작성한 그 일기를 읽으면서 이 남자가 어떻게 여기까지 흘러왔는지를 또 전해 듣게 됩니다.
And Mido, by reading the diaries that 오대수 has written during the incarceration, she indirectly becomes privy to his story.
또 마지막으로는 이 모든 이야기가 결국 오대수가 최면술사에게 적어보낸 편지에 들어있는 내용이기도 한 것입니다.
But in the end, the whole story that you've seen in the film, basically, it's a story told in a long letter he has written to the hypnotist to make that last request,
그런가
to
하면
plead with her.
미도의 일생은 이유진이 선물해주는 오대수에게 열어보기를 유도하는 그 사진 앨범의 하나의 이야기로서 요약되어 있죠. 갓난아기서부터 지금까지의 성장 과정의 사진으로.
And also, Mido's life, the girl's life, is stored in the photo album. Her whole life is summarized in that photo album that Eugene, the villain, wants Odesu to open up and read or see.
그 사진 앨범의 첫 장, 첫 페이지를 기억하신다면 마지막에 나타나는 미도가 왜 갑자기 빨간색 옷을 입고 있는지를 이해하실 수 있을 겁니다.
If you can remember the first photo you see in the photo album, you will understand why Mido is wearing that red clothes at the end of the film.
I'm going to need to wrap it up, unfortunately. I mean, that one scene, I think we'll all agree, or that one sequence, I think we'd all agree we could talk all day about, because it's such an example of cinema, and I, you know, it's an honour to have you here. We're talking with you again tomorrow, but I really hope and think that, you know, seeing an example of cinema like this, true cinema, grand cinema, that's as visceral and as exciting and as powerful as just the short examples we've seen today. I really hope that that can inspire our audience here of New Zealand filmmakers as well, and we're very honoured to have you. Thank you very much.